Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
In the past, Lucia felt that she could do anything to achieve her goal of becoming a flight attendant. But life cruelly shattered her dreams. Her wings of hope were broken on a quite ordinary day. The girl returned home from her routine job as a pastry chef at the supermarket and, after a quick dinner, started reading her English textbook when her mother's old friend Micaela came to visit. Lucia knew her since she was a child, and she had no idea that a typical visit from a friend would bring so many unpleasant surprises. She had no intention of eavesdropping on her mother talking in the kitchen with Micaela, but the thin walls of the apartment and the fact that Lucia was studying with a paper textbook instead of an online audio lesson played a fatal role. Micaela thought the girl was in her room with headphones on and couldn't hear them, so she didn't even lower her voice talking to Lucia's mom. "Nora, don't be silly. You must do everything you can to keep Roberto with you, at any cost. He's the director of a chain of car washes. And the best part is that he's willing to leave his wife for you." Mom's voice sounded muffled. She always spoke quietly, even when she argued with her daughter about her dream of becoming a flight attendant. The woman patiently explained that this profession looks romantic only from the outside, but in fact, requires a lot of physical strength. The next day, Lucia, as if hypnotized by the quiet voice of her mother, applied to a culinary college and later became a very good professional. Deep in her soul, the girl realized that her dreams of the sky were childishly naive, but nevertheless, she continued to learn a foreign language. It became her main hobby. However, at that moment she forgot about the foreign language and listened to the conversation between her mother and Micaela attentively. Lucia noticed the justifying notes in her mother's voice and subconsciously felt that after this conversation her future would change a lot. "Micaela, honestly, I'm not trying to steal him from his family. Everything there has long been based on their laziness to change anything, and now Roberto has a reason to end a relationship that is already over. Don't think of me as a cruel woman trying to steal him from the woman who loves him. There's no love there, only indifference. Yes, I'm happy that Roberto and I started a relationship, and I would love it if he left his wife for me. Maybe we could even get married someday. And I realize that Roberto is my last chance. After all, I'm already 45. But Roberto has already voiced that he will leave the apartment to his wife and son, and his house is only in the process of construction. And it's not clear how he and his ex will divide this object, which should become a cozy mansion. Roberto says that his wife doesn't need that house, but who knows? It looks like he's going to move in here with me, and I don't think Lucia will be happy about it. We have to wait for the house to be completed, then we need to buy furniture, and so on. It's going to take a long time, and I'm not sure the three of us can live in this tiny apartment together. It's not that I don't trust my daughter or Roberto, but we only have one bedroom." Micaela sighed. She really was sincerely worried about her friend. Once, she also took the risk of building a relationship after she was divorced. As a result, Micaela had given up on the idea of starting a family again and had limited herself to short-term affairs. So she dared to give her friend some advice. "I'm probably rushing things, but it's better for you to consider all the possible options. I even think it's better if you and Roberto move into a rented apartment. Yes, it's expensive, but you won't ruin your relationship with Lucia. It's a little unusual, but your daughter is already grown up. It's time for her to think about her personal life because she's like a nun, work, bookstores, libraries, home, she doesn't even go anywhere else. It's more convenient for you and Roberto to rent an apartment than for Lucia. Can you imagine your life when Roberto's house is finished? You'll live in a huge luxury mansion. Every morning you'll go out on the balcony with a cup of flavored coffee and watch the sunrise. Your daughter is a very nice and smart girl. She can take care of herself. And it's time for both of you to take care of your personal life." After this bold Micaela statement, Nora ended the meeting very quickly, and the guest left the apartment without even saying goodbye to Lucia. The girl waited for her mother to tell her about her plans to change her personal life, but the woman pretended that nothing special was going on. Such secrecy of the closest person unpleasantly hurt Lucia. She was used to the fact that her mother was always frank and honest with her. She raised Lucia alone after the hasty escape of her boyfriend, who suddenly learned about the pregnancy of his young girlfriend. Her grandparents died when Lucia was a baby, so it was not surprising that Lucia's mom was the closest and dearest person to her. Of course, she was a big girl already, and she realized that Nora was an attractive woman who had already put enough effort into raising her daughter and had the right to live for herself and to be happy. However, Lucia couldn't accept the fact that there was someone else in her mom's life. After all, it had always been just the two of them. Lucia was terribly worried, realizing that their cozy girlish kingdom was coming to an end. After that overheard conversation, Lucia started saving money for a rainy day, which, as she felt, was inevitably approaching. The girl was not going to interfere with her mother's happiness, but she had no doubt that it would be very uncomfortable to live with a stranger man in a tiny one-bedroom apartment. The meeting with her mother's suitor confirmed the girl's gloomy premonitions. Her mom introduced Roberto to Lucia a couple of weeks later, and he treated the potential stepdaughter quite kindly and friendly. His friendliness and smile seemed fake, cold, and somehow threatening to her. "It's nice to meet you, Lucia. Your mom told me that you are learning English in your spare time. I'm sure you've already achieved success in it." The girl smiled politely. "Yes, thank you, everything is fine." The man asked something else, but Lucia felt uncomfortable and gave very short answers. The girl watched her mother trying to smooth over the awkwardness of her daughter's acquaintance with Roberto, but still, the communication was very tense. Lucia thanked her mother and, having washed her plate, went to her room to immerse in the learning process. She read the text, but she didn't understand anything. All she could think about was this unpleasant meeting. Roberto began to visit Nora and Lucia's apartment more and more often. The girl felt uncomfortable in the apartment where she had spent her whole life, but, as if to reward her, fate gave her an unexpected gift. Lucia met a charming guy by chance. He bought baked goods in the supermarket department and decided to thank the cook personally. Lucia was pleased to hear compliments about his skills, but she did not think that this pleasant moment would be continued. However, to the girl's amazement, the guy waited for her on the street after the end of the shift. He handed her a bouquet of flowers, introduced himself, and briefly told her about himself. "My name is Paolo. I came from a neighboring town on business for my father's company. He is a mid-level businessman. If you want, you can check this information on the internet. Type in the name Paulo Santos and you'll find the information about me and my father's business. You really hit me right in the heart with your culinary talent and then with your beauty. I thought that some fat middle-aged lady would come out of the kitchen, but not such a nice, slim, gorgeous girl." The enthusiastic customer was very polite and caring, and they began a beautiful romance. Nora was completely immersed in her relationship, but she noticed that her daughter had fallen in love and, worried about her, asked her to introduce her chosen one. The woman didn't like Paolo. She thought he was too perfect. His behavior was more like an actor's performance, but she didn't dare to dissuade Lucia from meeting the guy. The girl herself considered this relationship a huge favor of fate. The girl was ready to do anything just so that her beloved Paolo would understand how much she loved him. She agreed to move to his hometown. At that time, Roberto was already divorced, and Nora and Roberto's relationship was on its way to marriage, so her mother accepted her daughter's departure and did not interfere with it. "Darling, just think twice about it. It will not be easy to live in another town. You're grown up and can make your own decisions, but I think you're in too much of a hurry." By her daughter's stubbornly pursed lips, the woman understood that Lucia would not give up her idea to move to her beloved. The woman, holding back her nervousness, helped her grown-up little girl pack her bags. She even cried, hugging Lucia. Roberto offered to drive the couple to the train station. The man decisively interrupted the sad pause, picked up suitcases, and promised Nora once again to bring the girl and her boyfriend safely to the train station. They didn't take Nora with them. Lucia asked her to stay at home, quietly confessing to Paolo that she might change her mind if her mother started crying at the train station. On the way to his hometown, Paolo suggested they rent an apartment instead of staying at his parents' house. Hugging the girl, who trustingly snuggled up to him, he whispered sweet compliments in her ear and promised, "Just imagine, just the two of us, and no one will bother us." Lucia easily agreed with this idea, realizing that she would hardly feel comfortable in Paolo's rich parents' house. Immediately after arriving, Paolo suggested to go to his parents' house and introduce them to each other. "Lucia, I don't see any reason to postpone this. Why don't I introduce you to my parents right away? We'll also eat something there and then go and find an apartment. It's easier to make the right decisions on a full stomach." The girl didn't resist, although she was worried that she had a tired look after the separation from her mom and after the long road. However, Paolo comforted the girl, saying that she always looked wonderful. Soon the couple took a cab and headed to the building where his parents lived in a spacious 3-bedroom apartment. After Paolo introduced them to each other, Paolo's mother, Rosaria Santos, reproached her son for not warning her that he was coming with a guest. His father, Tobias Santos, who looked less stern than in the photos posted on the internet, warmly welcomed the guest. "Come in, Lucia, don't be shy. You probably want to refresh yourself after your trip, don't you? The bathroom is right down the hall." Although the man's voice sounded soft, the girl took the words as a strict order. Besides, she really wanted to wash her face with cold water to cool down her blushing cheeks. She realized that while she was at the bathroom, Paolo would be questioned in detail by his parents, and that did not make her feel any better. But she couldn't stay in the bathroom the whole evening, so she reluctantly came back to the guest room of the beautiful, spacious apartment. It was clear that only out of politeness they didn't humiliate her because of her low-class education and humble background. Her beloved's mother, having learned the girl's profession, made her a business proposal without hesitation. "Lucia, my friend owns a cafe, and they need a good cook. Would you like to work there?" To Rosaria's surprise, Lucia didn't jump at the opportunity, but took a pause. "Thank you so much for your participation, but I need to think about it. I actually had some other plans for my career. Let me announce my decision tomorrow, please." While his parents were making small talk with Lucia, Paolo immersed himself in his smartphone and soon found a quite affordable house. Going into another room, the boy arranged a meeting with the landlady and, returning to the table, announced, "Mom, Dad, me and Lucia are going to go and check out the house, but we will leave our suitcases here. Okay?" Rosaria tried to protest, saying that there was enough space for everyone, but Tobias intervened and said, "Don't, Rosaria. Our son has made the right decision. It will be more comfortable for him and Lucia to live separately. They are young, they have their own rhythm of life. They don't have to adapt to our lifestyle." Lucia clearly realized that Tobias had exaggerated the phrase about age. Both he and Rosaria looked wonderful. She could only guess that they were perhaps only a little older than her mother, but their well-groomed faces were a clear indication of their very different lifestyles. Rosaria's hands were a work of art, long fingers decorated with delicate manicures, and although Lucia and her mother also took care of themselves, the amount of money and time invested in taking care of their natural beauty was incomparable. Paolo's parents behaved with condescending but flawless politeness. Their son's unexpected visit with the girl he introduced as his fiancée did not confuse them or make them mad. They did not attack Lucia with questions, but still, they learned the main facts of her biography. The girl felt uncomfortable, so she gladly accepted her beloved's idea to go and check out the rented accommodation. She desperately wanted to get out of this fantastically beautiful apartment, to get away from the intense eyes, in which natural curiosity was mixed with a trace of contempt. Lucia had never been ashamed of her humble origins and the fact that she was raised without a father, but now she realized that for Paolo's parents, these factors were a great disappointment. The girl was terrified that they might try to separate them, and mentally promised herself to accept any accommodation as long as it had walls and a roof. She tried not to dress too hurriedly, but still, she was ready to go in just a minute. On the way to the potential apartment, Paolo told Lucia a little about the landlady. "Her name is Benita Castro, can you imagine? She said she is retired and has recently moved in with her daughter to help with the grandchildren. One of them broke his leg or his spine. I couldn't hear. She started sobbing. This poor guy will need a long rehabilitation, and Benita's daughter doesn't want to move to a private house because her apartment is closer to the hospital and there are some other problems. The girl was even ready to live with her beloved in a hovel, but the rented accommodation was beyond all expectations. It was a dream house. Even though it wasn't even April yet, and in some places there was dusty snow near the fences, Lucia realized that everything was very well maintained and every piece of land literally radiates with love and care. She liked the garden that had not yet blossomed, the table under the apple tree, the clean house, and the friendly landlady. Benita immediately invited the couple to the table and served coffee with dried currant sprigs and a delicious apple pie. This house seemed nice and cozy, and Lucia really liked it. Paolo, on the other hand, was not impressed by the house. He told the landlady that he would discuss everything together with his girlfriend and would call her back. Benita smiled gently and understandingly and promised that she would not show the house to anyone else for a couple of days. I can see that you are decent people, and with such tenants, I can be sure that the house will be safe, so I will be looking forward to your call. The territory is not huge, but if you will live here, I will show you where you can make a small vegetable garden and give you seeds. When I lived here, I had a great vegetable garden with very tasty vegetables. And if you stay till the end of September, you will see a real miracle. Apples will be ripe. Oh, how fragrant they are. And these apples can be stored until New Year's Eve, and sometimes even to February. I make delicious apple jam. I'll share the recipe if you are interested. Benita asked the visitors to wait for a moment and, opening the cabinet near the door, pulled out a jar from the shelf and handed it to Lucia. Here, try it yourself. The girl thanked politely and did not refuse. She was happy that on the first day after she had left her hometown, a stranger had been so kind to her. She saw it as a good sign, and her mood, which was very bad after talking to the boy's parents, considerably improved. After saying goodbye to the friendly woman, Lucia and Paolo went back to the boy's parents, holding hands. After a short moment of silence, the girl asked, "What exactly is wrong with this house?" "The house is clean, beautiful, comfortable, and the landlady is very friendly." Paolo shrugged his shoulders. "It's not a bad house. The price is the same as for a modest one-bedroom apartment in an upscale neighborhood." I glanced at the contract form, but as far as I understand, there are no tricks in it. There is no garage for the car, but this is not the main problem. I can park my car in the backyard. There should be enough space. But I think that a private house will be more troublesome than a regular apartment. The house needs more physical work, taking care of the territory. However, Lucia fell in love with the cozy dwelling and tried to convince Paolo that a bus stop nearby and clean air are much more important than an apartment in an upscale neighborhood. In turn, Paolo asked his beloved, "Well, now it's your turn to answer honestly. Why did you refuse to accept my mom's offer to get a job at her friend's cafe?" Lucia did not hide her ambitions. "You know, Paolo, I've had a dream since childhood. I want to become a flight attendant, and I even found out that in your town I can learn this profession. I even learn English to make my dream come true." The guy gently hugged the girl and murmured in her ear, "How can I let my beloved spouse take such a risk? It's a very dangerous profession. In addition, there are many different passengers. I don't want any assholes trying to flirt with you." The girl's heart froze when Paolo called her his spouse for the first time, but she didn't ask him about the date of their wedding, because the guy continued, "I'm sure you'd better accept a job at the cafe. At least you'll feel more comfortable there. And I wouldn't have to worry about you." So, while talking, the couple reached Paolo's parents' apartment. Rosara had already prepared beds for her son and his girlfriend and could not help but mock Lucia. "Lucia, I'm a bit old-fashioned, so excuse me, but I've made a bed for you in the living room. Is that okay?" The blushing girl only awkwardly said thank you and, after a moment, told Paolo that she needed some fresh air. The boy was surprised. "Lucia, we have just arrived." However, the girl explained to him that she did not want to disturb his family by calling her mother on the phone. Paolo, I need to tell her that everything is fine. You just don't know my mom. She will ask me about everything in detail and the conversation may take too long. Besides, I need her advice about the job I'm offered. Sighing, the guy offered his beloved privacy on the balcony. Since you want to stay alone, no one will hear you there, and I will be less worried about you. Lucia kissed him on the cheek and hurried to share with my mom all the news. I was welcomed quite warmly, and Rosaria even offered me a job. And today we went to check out a house to rent. I really liked it. All in all, everything was fine. However, Nora was not so optimistic. Sweetie, be very careful. Frankly, it's a bit suspicious. I wouldn't work in the cafe of my future mother-in-law's friend. Under such conditions, Rosaria will instantly know your every move, and it's unclear how she will interpret it. Think it over. Although perhaps this option may be suitable for the first time. The girl calmed down a little after talking to her mother and returned to Paolo in a good mood. And the guy had a nice surprise for her. Lucia, while you were talking on the balcony, I called Benita and said that we agree to all the conditions and tomorrow we are ready to move into her house. Lucia was happy. She also wanted to do something nice for the guy, and inspired by the positive mood she said that she would happily accept a job in the cafe. But I would like to be hired not because Rosaria asked, but because of my professional skills. Paolo hugged his beloved girl. Don't worry about that. I know you're a true professional and a hard worker. Okay, let's go tell my mom you said yes. After a brief conversation with her friend, Rosaria told Lucia. You're already employed, the interview is just a formality. I've written down on a piece of paper where you should go and when. Estela Moreno will be waiting for you, and I think Paolo can explain how to get to the right address. Well, it has been a busy day, so I wish you a good night, as there is so much to do tomorrow. Lucia said good night to Paolo's parents and Paolo himself and fell asleep almost instantly as soon as she reached the sofa. The interview with Estela was not very difficult. She asked the girl a little about her work experience and then asked her to provide a recipe for a few popular dishes. Lucia brilliantly passed the test and soon was introduced to the rest of the staff as a new cook. Estela asked her to come to work the very next day. Meanwhile, Lucia and Paolo were getting ready to move into their new place. Benita signed the contract, explained everything once again, and, asking them to call if anything happened, went to the bus stop to go to the other side of town to her daughter and grandchildren. The couple had no time to relax, but still, they managed to find a few hours to organize a romantic dinner dedicated to the relocation and Lucia's employment. The routine workdays began. The job took a lot of energy from Lucia, but she made sure that her beloved Paolo did not suffer because of her employment. A delicious meal was always waiting for him at home. In addition, Lucia managed to create a cozy atmosphere at home. She had lived in a tiny apartment all her life, so the house seemed like a real fairy tale castle to her. The landlady, who visited the tenants once a month, was happy that her house was in good hands. Lucia, I am so grateful to you. You have done wonders. My house has never looked so wonderful. How do you manage to keep everything in such order? You're so hardworking. Paolo is lucky to have you, and I'm lucky to have you. I have heard stories when tenants almost ruined houses, lived in dirt, and houses required repairs afterward. So I am grateful to fate that I met you. The girl treated Benita like a grandmother. She didn't remember anything about her biological grandmother, so Benita became almost a part of her family. It had only been 6 months since they had met, but Lucia felt that the woman was a good, wise friend. She always invited the woman to the table and served the delicious cakes she made, or even soup and some unusual brand new desserts that she came up with herself. Benita glowed with pleasure and respect and in turn told the girl about her own special recipes. However, after such prolonged visits, Paolo always expressed his displeasure. Lucia, she is not our friend. You don't have to offer her coffee and desserts. I could understand it if she offered us a discount in return for treats. But she just shows up for the money, eats the desserts, and leaves. And we keep paying the same price for the house. Once Paulo saw that Lucia gave the landlady a bag of fresh cakes. Barely waiting for Benita to leave, he became indignant. Am I working so that you can feed an old woman who takes money from us? Don't you think you're being too generous? Please, stop wasting my money this way. That was the first time Lucia got angry. She was tired of Paulo's blunt accusations that he was supporting her, so she objected. You forgot to take into account that I work too. Yes, you pay the rent, but I also work and contribute to our budget. Let me remind you that for the last few months, I've been the only one buying groceries and carrying heavy bags from the supermarket, and you haven't even helped me once, even though you have a car. They quarreled, and Paulo slammed the door and left the house. Lucia thought he would get some air and come back soon. But she saw him again only the next evening, and he behaved as if nothing had happened. The girl did not return to the quarrel either, and normal relations seemed to be established between the couple again. The girl was getting more and more confused by the fact that Paulo, who used to make obvious hints about the wedding, has long stopped mentioning the official marriage. Even Lucia's mother had already managed to marry Roberto, but Lucia didn't have any development in her relationship, even on the contrary. Lucia wasn't a naive girl, and she realized that Paulo's passion had cooled down a lot. At first, he stopped meeting her from work, and then he began to disappear somewhere. Now she was alone on weekends and during weekday evenings. The girl tried to ask him to go for a walk, to a party, or to other events, which he voiced as a reason for his absence, but he always found 1,000 excuses to leave Lucia at home. One day after a delicious dinner, he even told the girl that she has turned from a cheerful girl into a boring nerd, and he is bored with her and doesn't want to spend time together. Anyway, I'm going to live with my parents. I've paid for the house until the end of the month, and then you can do whatever you want. Lucia spoke calmly, even though it was hard to control herself. So, Paulo, you're leaving me, right? The guy was not even going to be embarrassed. I'd say we're breaking up by mutual consent. It's life, it's nobody's fault, but it turned out that you and I are completely different personalities. I hope you won't hold a grudge against me, and we'll say goodbye in a kind way. The guy wanted to kiss her cheek, but she recoiled from him as if he was infected. Paulo was okay with that. He picked up his bag, which, as it turned out, he had packed in advance, while Lucia was at work and set the table, and said goodbye. Lucia followed him in silence to the gate. Only when the familiar figure of her beloved man, who never turned around, disappeared around the corner, the girl locked the door and felt a strange sense of freedom. In fact, she was tired of uncertainty. She didn't understand who she was for Paulo, whether she was a fiancée or an employee who performed the duties of a cook, a maid, and fulfilled his desires in bed. Of course, this was not what the girl had dreamed of when she moved to Paulo's hometown. She foresaw an inevitable breakup with Paulo. But what happened the next day shocked her. She was fired, even though she was doing her job perfectly. In the morning, Estella summoned her to her office and told her glumly, "Lucia, please don't get me wrong. I don't want to ruin my friendship with Rosaura." The girl stood motionless. She began to understand the meaning of her boss's words, and pain pierced her heart. No matter how bitter it was for Lucia to accept it, her mother was right. It was not worth working for people close to the family of her boyfriend. Fortunately, Estella paid her salary for the entire month and even gave her an envelope with some cash as compensation. As soon as she came to the HR department, Lucia realized the reason for this generosity. She wasn't even asked to write a letter of resignation. Technically, she wasn't on the employee list. She actually worked as a cook there all those months, but according to the papers, she never worked there at all. Lucia realized that there was no point in talking to the HR manager and headed to Estella's office again, but Estrella tried to comfort Lucia. "Look, well, there was a misunderstanding. You were paid for the work, right? I gave you an envelope with money in it every month. Yeah, you never officially worked here, so what? Besides, I compensated you for that unpleasant moment with an extra bonus." Seeing that the former cook is already angry, the boss threatened. And don't be silly. I don't recommend you go to the tax authorities or the labor inspectorate. Paolo's relatives and my friends work there. Think about it and guess which side they'll be on. The angry Lucia ran out of her boss's office without even saying goodbye. She went into the kitchen to pick up a small box with personal belongings, and, listening to her colleagues wishing her success, she struggled not to burst into tears. The girl felt broken, but the kind words gave her courage and prevented her from despairing. Lucia made an attempt to restore justice and decided to take a step that she thought was the most reliable. She decided to go directly to Paolo, counting on his decency. After all, it was not her fault that they had broken up. She didn't make a scene and didn't try to stop him, so she had reason to think that her ex would not refuse to help her. The guy did not answer the calls, then the phone was unavailable. The girl decided to wait for Paolo near the entrance of the building where he lived. She wanted to ask for help. However, the meeting didn't go as she expected. The first surprise was that Paolo was not coming home alone. He was accompanied by a beautiful lady. Her face left no doubt that plastic surgeons had worked on it, and her body, barely covered by a short jacket and a tight skirt, was clearly changed by surgery. Lucia asked Paolo to give her a few minutes, but the stranger deliberately hugged the boy gently and said brazenly, "Listen, I know who you are. Say what you want, but quickly. You can speak in my presence. I need to know everything about my fiancé's matters." After saying this, Paolo's new girlfriend pressed herself even closer to him, as if demonstrating her rights to the guy. He did not even try to deny the words of this girl and impatiently asked Lucia, "Really, let's keep it short. What do you want?" "I want to go home. I'm exhausted." After Lucia stated her request, Paolo only smiled crookedly and said, "I can't help you. My aunt and Estella are best friends, and my aunt really does work at the labor inspectorate, and she'll help her best friend, not you. You'll never prove that you were fired illegally. You don't have any chance. So take my good advice, be happy that at least you got paid. Estella could simply kick you out without your last salary. Anyway, you have to accept the situation with gratitude." Paolo's companion looked with exaggerated attention at the elegant golden watch and then covered her mouth with her palm as if hiding a laugh. Lucia had nothing left but to leave. The fact that she had money to pay the rent for the next few months didn't do much to calm Lucia down. She realized that she needs a new job as soon as possible, otherwise, she would have to go back to her mom's place. The girl tried to find advantages in this situation and realized that she not only got rid of an unreliable lying partner and dishonest boss, but she also got some free time. Lucia desperately wanted to visit her mother, and she decided not to delay her visit. Nora's eyes sparkled with happiness when she saw her daughter on the threshold of the apartment. However, the woman instantly realized from her look that the girl returned not with pleasant news. Having listened to her daughter, who let herself burst into tears, her mother got sincerely sad for her and immediately suggested, "Why don't you come back? We'll find a way out. Why should you stay in that town? You'll be better off at home." Lucia, who had finally stopped crying, calmed down. She understood that her mom was now married and had her own life, and she didn't want to be a burden to her. But her mom's support helped her a lot. She sobbed in her mom's arms for a long time, and finally, for the first time in all those days, she felt much better. Lucia wiped the rest of her tears and told her mother what she wanted to do. Renting an apartment in our city is much more expensive than there, especially since Benita charges a very modest fee. Besides, I really love that house, and we have a great relationship. But the salaries are better here, and there are more job offers in our city. So I'll look for a job here, but I will live there for now. It's not that long to get here by train from that town." Nora knew her daughter was right, but she insisted that Lucia should not go anywhere tonight. Roberto was not embarrassed by the presence of an adult stepdaughter. He brought a cot into the kitchen and nobly suggested, "Nora, make yourself and your daughter comfortable in the room, and I'll sleep here. The most strategically important things, such as the refrigerator and the TV, are close by. What else do I need to be happy? I think you two need to spend some time together." Lucia noticed that Roberto really loved her mother. She was pleased to see the gentle touches exchanged between them. The unexpected care she received was both pleasant and at the same time made Lucia feel a burning sense of shame for not being polite when she met Roberto. The next day was Saturday, and her mother, overcoming her daughter's resistance, dragged Lucia out for a walk. "I've been planning to go shopping for a long time. You're here just in time. You will help me pick out a new dress. You have good taste. It's hard for me to choose suitable clothes without your help." Although Lucia was not too fond of shopping, she missed her mother so much that she agreed to visit all the departments her mom wanted. It's been a long time since they've had such a wonderful time together. Lucia even saw a vacancy announcement in the food court, wrote down the phone number, and asked the staff how happy they were with the job. Unfortunately, she was not happy with the answer of the talkative cleaning lady. It turned out that the boss didn't consider the staff to be humans at all. Thanking the friendly lady, Lucia and her mother finally went home. The girl felt a little more relaxed. It wasn't so heavy on her heart anymore. Nora and Roberto persuaded Lucia to take at least a short vacation. Mom asked, "Lucia, stay with us for a while. It would be more convenient for you to arrive promptly to the interview, and you will not miss a good job." The girl realized that her mom was right and agreed, but she tried to be home not too often. She looked for vacancies as a cook or pastry chef and even attended a few interviews. However, there seemed to be a recession in this field. After another phrase, "we will call you," pronounced by a recruiter, Lucia could not stand it. "Thank you, but at least can you tell me what is wrong with my candidacy? I have a good education and work experience. If necessary, I can demonstrate my professional skills." The lady sitting at the table looked away from the computer and answered honestly, "Listen, I have a daughter of the same age as you, and I'll be honest with you. She is 23 now, just like you. She's single, like you. But at any moment some good guy may appear in your life, then a wedding, pregnancy, and then we have to look for another candidate again. Even if I bring you to the director's office now, he will never hire you. We've already had 3 chefs go on maternity leave. I'd really like to hire you, but it's not worth it. I'm sorry. My daughter was a waitress for a few months, and our boss didn't even think of promoting her to another position. Can you believe that? He said that a young girl will be more useful as a waitress because a charming girl can promote any drink or dessert in the proper way. And the cook should be either a fat middle-aged woman or a man who definitely won't go on maternity leave." Lucia thanked her for her frankness and said goodbye. Her mood was completely ruined. She had the feeling that no one needed her professional skills. However, following the advice of a famous American novel, which she had read in the original language, she decided to think about it tomorrow and simply went for a walk around the city. The familiar streets were welcoming her with some renovations, and it was like meeting up with longtime friends. Passing by one of the cafes located in the city center, where the tour guides love to take foreign tourists, Lucia saw a job announcement. The cafe was looking for waitresses. Why not? The girl thought. At least I should try. Even the daughter of the HR manager can't get a job as a cook, so I have to accept whatever's available. Lucia easily passed the interview. She was invited to start her internship the next Monday. The stunningly beautiful manager Fernanda Blanco, who spoke to the candidate together with the director Gilberto Arias, explained, "It's our most relaxed day in terms of customer service. You'll be able to practice. The other waiters will have time to explain everything to you and help you, and you will get used to the work rhythm in a more relaxed atmosphere." Surprisingly, Lucia easily made friends with the staff, and her knowledge of foreign languages helped her to become one of the best employees. Now the foreigners could not only point their fingers at the menu, showing what they wanted, but also get detailed information from Lucia, who was friendly and knowledgeable about the nuances of the cuisine, so the tips were much more generous. Now her paycheck was even better than when she worked as a cook at Estella's Cafe. Plus, there were free lunches for the staff, which helped to save a lot of money. Lucia successfully withstood the ordeal of New Year's parties, which began almost immediately after the November holidays, and, despite her mother's persuasions, she was not going to change her job or place of residence. After Paolo's betrayal, the girl rejected all men who tried to court her, and her personal life was completely quiet. For quite a long time, Lucia had been living as if by some inertia, and she realized she needed to change something in her life, but physically and mentally difficult work as a waitress suited her well. There was something similar to the profession of a flight attendant, who also had to be friendly with all kinds of people, but somewhere in the sky. The girl was stuck in an endlessly repeating day, like in a comedy with a ridiculous but charming actor. She was happy with her job at the cafe. The owner, Gilberto, was respectful to the staff, and even the newcomers quickly learned that he was not really the one in charge of the place. The man had a permanent girlfriend, Fernanda, the one who was present at the interview, and in general at all important business meetings. She was a wise and intelligent young woman who managed to make her way from an ordinary waitress to the manager of the cafe. But she still couldn't force Gilberto to divorce his wife, even though he hasn't lived with her in years. An elderly dishwasher, Ida, who treated Lucia like a daughter, told her all the details of this love story. I remember Fernanda from her first day in this cafe. She was a good girl, smart and very hardworking. Besides, she's very pretty, and Gilberto fell in love with her right away. Actually, they didn't hide their relationship. Our boss had some unpleasant incident with his wife, and he considered himself single. But now he can't divorce his wife and at the same time can't break up with Fernanda. I know Gilberto since his childhood. We used to live in the same neighborhood. Fernanda is the best for him in every way. She was the one who insisted on buying this building for the cafe. She gradually worked on hiring staff, on the menu, and on everything else. As you can see, now it is almost a luxury restaurant. No matter what kind of relationship the unusual couple who ran the cafe had, Lucia was fine with it. The boss never made inappropriate hints. Fernanda, who actually managed the whole process, appreciated Lucia, who could provide excellent service to the guests in English. The girl was even praised several times by Gilberto, who was stingy with kind words. Every Lucia's day was similar to the previous one, with only the seasons changing. After a short golden and scarlet sunny period came a nasty rainy time, which was soon replaced by frosty days that were decorated with prickly snow. The dazzling winter was replaced by spring, which in turn was chased away by a hot summer. And then the cold weather came again, and the mornings were dark and humid. The girl watched the seasons change outside the window of the train and felt sad, or she felt a strange sense of timid hope for the best. During the year, she got used to seeing the same people who, just like her, went to work in another city and returned in the evening. She even began to say hello to some of them by nodding her head. Sometimes she stayed overnight at her mother's place. Nora and Roberto had already bought a bigger apartment and it was very comfortable, but usually she was eager to return to Benita's cozy house. On one of the cloudy autumn days, when there is no energy already in the morning, Lucia was on her way to work and saw an old woman on the train wearing old clothes that clearly did not fit her in size. The stranger attracted the girl's gaze with some confusion in her eyes and an exhausted look. The girl was sure that she had never seen this woman before. Lucia felt sorry for the stranger. The woman was clearly disoriented. Lucia asked the woman sitting next to her, with whom they sometimes chatted on various topics, if she knew the new passenger, and got a negative answer. She couldn't be late for work, it was a strict rule, so she had to think of something urgently. Her conscience would not allow her to leave the unfortunate stranger without help. Trying not to frighten the woman, the girl approached her and asked, "Excuse me, are you all right?" The stranger's confused look said much more than her one-word answer. "I don't know." She didn't remember her name, didn't know where she was going or where she was coming from, and it was obvious that she needed help. Lucia suggested that the old woman sit down in her seat, and she quietly asked her acquaintance if she could take the stranger to the police station. But she only said, "I'm sorry, but there's no way. We have fines for being late, so I suggest you just take her to the duty police officer at the nearest station." That's it, then it's out of your responsibility. Let the relevant authorities deal with it. Also, I believe, there are desks in supermarkets where you can bring the kids who got lost. It can help too, but I'm not sure that the nearest store has such a service. Although the time was calculated almost to the minute, Lucia realized that she could hardly act so indifferently. Mentally cursing herself for her compassion, upon arrival the girl took the confused and helpless woman to the police station. Luckily it was on the way, and it was possible to get from there to the cafe by cab very quickly. After all, the girl could already afford a cab ride. Lucia hoped that at the police the stranger's problem would be quickly solved, but while the police officer Yvonne was recording the girl's testimony and copying her data from her passport, she overheard his conversation with her colleague. Listen, well, this lady is not in the lost and found database. We'll check her fingerprints just in case. We can call someone from the hospital, but most likely we'll have to take her there ourselves. Yvonne was indignant. And then what? Where should I put her? Do you want me to babysit her or put her in prison? Lucia's heart ached at the blatant cynicism of the police officers. She wanted to protest, but she realized that it was a bad idea to quarrel with the police officers. Holding back her emotions and using all her charm, she gently addressed the policeman. Yvonne, I'm sorry. I see that you have a lot of trouble because of me, and I want to apologize for that. You have my passport details, and you know where I work. Come to our cafe, and I'll provide you with a good discount. I understand that you want to put her in a cell with the criminals, and I understand that you have no choice. But if it's possible, let this woman come with me now, please. Just imagine it's your family member and they could end up in the same cell with criminals. She doesn't remember anything, but she doesn't look like a criminal. The man hesitated, but the colleague standing next to him suddenly supported the plan. Listen, Yvonne, this is the way out. I know that cafe, and I've seen this girl there many times. I know the owner of this cafe. Gilberto said she speaks excellent English and she is one of the best employees. Let that old lady go with her to the cafe. There's already no room in the cell. Thanks to this unexpected advocacy, soon Lucia in the company of her confused companion came out of the police station and, having called a cab, explained to the stranger. I work at the cafe. We'll go there now. I'll ID you in the utility room. It's quite comfortable there. I'll bring you some food. You'll rest. Calm down. She managed to sneak into the cafe through the back entrance without meeting anyone, and even without being late. The girl quickly hid her new friend and gave her some hot tea, quickly changed into the uniform, and hurried to start her workday. Then Lucia went to the kitchen, grabbed her lunch, which she was supposed to eat at lunchtime, and took it to the utility room. Here, eat while it's still warm. Looking at the way the hungry eat, Lucia realized that in the past the stranger knew the rules of table etiquette perfectly well. In addition, her hands were well-groomed, with good manicures. The girl didn't want to embarrass the lady, and it was time to go back to work, so she left the utility room. But when she came back there, she saw Gilberto standing on the threshold of the utility room. The man was furious and said in an ominous hissing voice, "Lucia, what the hell is going on here? Who is this? I don't see a sign on the door of my cafe saying we offer charity lunches. Who do you think you are? Why are you bringing here someone you don't even know without asking permission?" The boss stopped all the girl's attempts to justify herself. The man was furious, and even Fernanda, who came soon after, could not stop him. He ignored his girlfriend's request to clear things up first, and, probably for the first time ever, he rudely ordered her not to interfere. By the final part of his angry speech, Gilberto seemed to have lost his mind and began to say very hurtful words to Lucia. "Do you think you're the only one who speaks English? Do you think you're a superstar?" Then he suddenly told Fernanda strictly, "Put on your waitress uniform and go to the guests before they get angry." Shifting his gaze to the frightened Lucia, Gilberto said harshly, "Consider your shift over, and so is your job at my cafe." Even though Fernanda realized that Lucia was the most hard-working employee and she was responsible for a lot of the work, she didn't dare to argue with her lover and just coldly remarked, "If I work today as a waitress, there will be no one to answer the phone, talk to suppliers, and in general manage the process. No matter how angry the boss was, the prosperity of his cafe was always in the first place, and he realized that he had overreacted, but it was too late. He wasn't the type of person who would take his words back and apologize. Lucia no longer even tried to justify herself. The calm remark of the wise Fernanda and the humility of the subordinate cooled Gilberto's fervor a little. The man took out a purse from his pocket, took out a few bills, and handed them to Lucia. "Here, you've earned it. Come tomorrow for your last paycheck. Give your letter of resignation to Fernanda. That's it. I don't want to see you anymore." Gilberto turned and walked away. Fernanda, who had already put on her uniform, hugged Lucia and whispered, "I'll talk to Gilberto before tomorrow, don't worry." "Okay, I have to go." Surprised by such support from the arrogant manager, Lucia could only whisper, "Thank you, Fernanda." While the boss was scolding his subordinate, the stranger was quiet. But after there was only Lucia left in the corridor, holding the money in her hand, the woman got up and approached her. She didn't know what would happen if the only girl who was merciful to her suddenly got angry about being fired. But Lucia only said, "Wait a minute, I'll change my clothes and we'll go to my place." Soon the girl and her new friend left the cafe through the back entrance. But suddenly they were caught up by Ida. The woman called out to the former employee and, after she turned to her, held out a bag. "Take it, Fernanda asked me to give it to you. You're today's lunch. Your fridge must be empty. Don't be too angry with Gilberto, he's in a bad mood today. Maybe tomorrow he'll change his mind. He's proud and will never apologize, but maybe he'll let you keep working here." Having said a warm goodbye to Ida, the girl decided to let herself go home by cab, so as not to wait for the train until the evening. Lucia explained to the unknown woman, "Let's go to my place. The police have all my data, so in case of anything, they will contact us quickly. And there you can finally get some rest." During the ride, Lucia mentally scolded herself for being so stupid she could call her mother and ask her to arrange a hospital examination for the stranger. However, the girl decided not to call from the cab. She did not want to worry the stranger, who seemed to have a less anxious look. In addition, Lucia noticed that in the car, the woman immediately fastened her seatbelt. The girl had no knowledge of medicine at all, but it was clear that the stranger had retained most of the basic skills. Lucia's thoughts were occupied with another problem now. Today was the day Benita was supposed to come by to get the money. At first, she thought she might introduce the stranger as her grandmother, but eventually decided not to lie. But how could she properly inform Benita that she had brought a stranger into her house without even asking her permission? After agonizing reflections, the girl decided to tell the whole truth and asked Benita to let the stranger live on her territory for a while. Lucia tried to come up with various reasons why she has to help this stranger. And she replayed the scenario of the conversation with Benita in her head. However, the meeting with the landlady developed according to none of the scenarios the girl had predicted. After greeting the tenant and the stranger, Benita began to look intently into the elderly woman's face. After a few seconds, she suddenly asked, Laura Rodriguez, is that you? Don't you recognize me? We worked together at the factory in the capital. You worked in administration and I worked in the main workshop. I'm Benita Castro. Our kids went to the same kindergarten. Remember when they refused to accept our children? But you brought the principal a huge jar of honey and a bucket of ghee, and my husband gave the principal a boat, and then the children were accepted. Do you remember? Lucia felt the elderly woman standing next to her clutched her arm as if trying to find support. Despite the reaction she had developed, Lucia barely had time to pick up the unfortunate woman when she lost consciousness. With the help of a frightened Benita, who immediately rushed to the kitchen for water and a towel, and to the bedroom for a pillow, Lucia provided some comfort to the unconscious woman. The landlady quietly explained, Laura and I haven't seen each other for about 25 years since the factory closed after the crisis. She left for another city with her husband, who got a job in construction. We corresponded for a while, then I moved here with my family to the house of my husband's uncle, and I guess I gave her the wrong new address. But I can't be mistaken, it's Laura. The girl couldn't believe such a coincidence. In some incredible way, fate brought together two friends who had not seen each other for 25 years. So, Lucia and Paolo rented Benita's house by chance. By chance she decided not to move back to her mother's place, and by chance, Laura got on the same train Lucia was taking to work. Benita shook her hands. I had forgotten that I had ammonia. Now, Laura, hold on. Soon the woman returned with a cotton pad and a bottle of ammonia, and then put the cotton pad under the nose of her longtime friend. After a few seconds, the woman opened her eyes and looked around in surprise, then focused her eyes on the landlady and said, Benita, hello, dear, I didn't think we'd see each other again. Life is so unpredictable. Benita and Lucia rejoiced and helped the woman, whose memory seemed to have returned, to get onto the sofa. The girl hurried to the kitchen to make coffee, which would help them all to replenish their strength a little after such an unexpected event. She was quite excited, and out of habit, she unconsciously needed a quick dough for the pie. Then she took out all the food that was in the house, heated it up, and brought it into the living room. Benita asked the girl, Lucia, there is a photo album with a green cover on the top shelf in the closet. Bring it here, please. There are pictures from the factory and pictures from different trips. The factory management provided us with a bus on weekends, and we often traveled to the countryside with our families. It was a wonderful time. Lucia hurried to fulfill her request. She was very curious to see the photos. There was no doubt about it, the confused old woman she had met on the train that morning and the charming woman in the pictures were the same person. While the women were talking about the past, Lucia went outside to pick apples for a pie and called her mom. Confusingly telling all the unexpected events of the fall day, the girl asked for help. Mom, could you ask Roberto if he knows anyone who can help Laura? I haven't found out yet if she knows her current address or if she only remembers events from her past, but I think there's a chance of getting her back to her normal life. She probably needs a good doctor first. I know it's very late now, but please talk to Roberto. Nora reassured her daughter. Lucia, you're a hero. Of course, I will talk to Roberto. As soon as there is any information, I'll call you back or send you a text message. Lucia picked the apple from the tree, returned to the house, finished the pie, and joined Benita and Laura. The women's eyes were wet, but it was impossible to tell if they were crying from happiness or sadness. The girl didn't know how to ask her politely, but finally said, Excuse me, Laura, maybe there's someone we should call to let them know you're okay? It was clear from the woman's gloomy expression that her life was not going well. Laura began her story, which gave Benita and Lucia goosebumps. I don't want to think badly of someone I considered part of my family, but I have no doubt now that my memory loss was no accident. It so happened that my son and daughter-in-law died when their son Alberto was 10 years old. My children's funeral was the worst day of my life. I just wanted to lie in the grave together with my son. But I had a grandson, I had to take care of him. So I raised Alberto together with my husband. He grew up to be a decent man. He managed to develop the business that his parents had started and that we barely managed to maintain. My husband was so happy for him, and then one day he just didn't wake up. The doctors later said that a blood clot had broken off. Then I almost followed my husband. I had a heart attack. Alberto was the only one who took care of me. He fed me, changed my diapers, if there was no nurse around, made sure I took my medications, and got me back on my feet. We were left alone, just the two of us, but we were happy. Alberto is wonderful, smart, caring, and not greedy. He brought his fiancée home. Her name is Lita. I was already thinking that we would soon be looking for a small house for Alberto and Lita. But Alberto and Lita went on vacation, some kind of pre-wedding trip. He called me, everything was fine, but then something happened between them, I don't know what. I was shocked when Lita came back home alone, a few days before the end of the trip. She said that she had quarreled with Alberto, but on the way home she had already repented and now she would wait for him here to apologize. For several days, my grandson sent me messages saying he couldn't call me, but he loved me and missed me. When I tried to call, he never picked up, then his phone went silent. Once I blamed Lita for leaving Alberto alone at the resort, but she burst into tears so naturally that I was ashamed of my suspicions. I was getting worse every day. I wanted to sleep all the time, and my grief seemed to be dulled, but that made me feel even more uncomfortable. Alberto's fiancée hardly ate anything. She was so worried. She sent emails to the embassy and called there many times, but then she told me that I had to go there personally. They would only talk to Alberto's family members. She said it was the only chance to find my grandson. So, I collected all the required papers according to the list Lita had given me, and she took me to the embassy. I didn't suspect anything and took a sedative pill, as Lita said. I obeyed, and that was it. Then my consciousness went blank. I woke up at some train station in stinking clothes and started asking people around me where I was and if they knew who I was. A policeman came up and advised me to get out of there, so I wandered around. Luckily, it was summer. I settled down in an abandoned summer house. I found a purse. I wanted to keep it, but I didn't dare. I found the owner through a vegetable vendor who gave me expired goods. She turned out to be his regular customer. She gave me some money in gratitude and I felt better, but I could not remember anything and I was afraid that she would not understand me if I asked for help. Anyway, as soon as it got colder, I was buying tickets and warming myself on the trains. I hoped someone was looking for me, so I didn't go far from the station where I woke up. The local police stopped chasing me away, but they didn't bother to search for my relatives. I still can't believe Lucia noticed me and didn't leave me in distress. And fate led me to you, Benita. You can't even imagine the feeling in my heart when I heard my name and surname. It was like a tumbler clicked, and I remembered everything. Lucia served a pie with delicious apples and went to call her mother to report the newly discovered information and ask for one more favor. We need someone from law enforcement, too. Laura remembered her address, but it's in another city. I'm afraid to let her go there. It seems that her grandson's fiancé has turned out to be a criminal who knows what she might have done in those 1.5 months while Laura has been wandering around the country. She could be very dangerous. Laura has no ID now. She can't even file a police report against Lita. Nora, feeling her daughter's indignation, wrote down all the details and promised. I don't think Roberto knows anyone in that city, but don't worry, he's smart and will come up with something clever. It is quite possible that her ID and other papers are still in her apartment. In this case, she doesn't even have to restore them. Tomorrow he'll make some calls about a doctor's appointment, so be prepared. The girl thanked her mother and began to think about how she would arrange everything tomorrow. Bringing Laura with her to the hospital and waiting there for information about the doctor's appointment was not the best option. What if the specialist didn't have time for them? Benita came to the rescue and asked Lucia, "Do you mind if I stay here today? I think Laura needs me more than my daughter and grandchildren." The girl was even embarrassed. "Benita, this is your house. Of course, you can stay here. I was going to ask you to stay with Laura tomorrow morning, just to make her feel better. I have to go to the cafe tomorrow to get my last paycheck. But it won't take much time." When everything was solved in such a simple way, the women went to sleep because the day was really unusual and exhausting. In the morning, when Lucia came for her last paycheck, Fernanda gave her an envelope containing a large sum of money. Fernanda was awkwardly trying to apologize. "Gilberto has calmed down for now, but I forced him to pay good compensation. If you need any recommendations, just let me know. I actually enjoyed working with you, and it's too bad our boss doesn't respect good employees." Lucia was pleased to hear the praise, and she responded in kind. "Fernanda, you are a wonderful person, not just a talented manager. It has been a pleasure to be part of your team too, but I have some urgent matters in my life right now. But I will definitely come back for recommendations in the near future, thank you." A call from Roberto interrupted the conversation and, apologizing, Lucia hurried to answer. Mother's husband provided the coordinates of the doctor and said that the nearest appointment could be arranged only in 2 days. It's more complicated about the police. I need a little more time. But Lucia, please don't do anything on your own. It's dangerous. And if this woman is anxious to get home, try to slow her down. If everything she said is true, you could get into a lot of trouble. Nora is very worried and proud of you. Lucia promised she'd be careful. On the way to Benita's house, she had a new idea, and she hurried to share it with the women. You know, I think, along with solving your problems, we need to continue the search for news about your grandson. I speak English well, and I can make a request if you can tell me exactly what resort he was at and any other information that might help. The old woman perked up and told everything she knew. Lucia made the request, and the days of waiting began. However, they had time to do a lot of things in those days. Laura got medical advice and, thanks to the recommendations, felt much better. Thanks to Roberto's connections, a police report was accepted. It was just in time because they managed to stop Lita from selling Laura's apartment. A lot of things were revealed about the cunning lady when the police searched the apartment she had hastily left. Until Laura returned home, she and Lucia stayed at Roberto and Nora's place because the doctor advised her not to stop the treatment. When the reply came from abroad, Lucia tried to explain everything as gently as possible. Laura, your grandson is alive. He is at the hospital. The police found him, beaten up, without ID, phone, or any belongings. Anyway, I guess I'll have to go there to sort things out. Roberto helped again. He gave Nora's daughter enough money to travel abroad and bring the guy back, and a lawyer he knew issued a power of attorney that would be useful for that. Lucia thanked the man and promised to repay the debt, but he, holding Nora tightly to him, said, Lucia, come on. Actually, we are family. Nora supported her beloved. Seriously, dear, don't even think about it. Go and give Laura back the meaning of her life. Lucia had the first plane trip ever, and, looking at the flight attendants, she realized that her childhood dream had disappeared. Now she just wanted Laura's story to have a happy ending. The woman's grandson was not in the best condition, but doctors said that now that he had learned that his grandmother was alive, he had the motivation to recover. Lita lied about Laura's death from a heart attack and added that it was Alberto's fault because she died when he disappeared for a couple of days. The guy, who was beaten immediately after a quarrel with his fiancée and robbed, was tormented by guilt and did not want to recover or return to his homeland. He didn't know that the attack and robbery had been set up by Lita. She had even communicated with Laura on his behalf using his phone. During all of these unbelievable events, Benita became good friends with Lucia's parents and treated Laura as a sister. Alberto's recovery was much faster than the doctors had predicted, and both Benita and Laura said that Lucia was the reason for it. When Benita invited the people she already considered part of the family to her birthday party at a nice cafe in the park, everyone accepted the invitation, even though they had to travel the distance between cities. After a series of toasts in honor of the birthday lady, Alberto and Lucia decided to take a walk to enjoy the clean, slightly cold air and admire the snow glistening in the sun. Laura and her friend refused to go for a walk, and the young people did not persuade them. Benita's daughter with her husband and children, Nora and Roberto, also stayed in the cafe. Lucia gently supported Alberto by the arm. The guy was happy to walk with his own feet in the park, but suddenly Lucia noticed that he tensed up. Looking toward the tree where the couple was feeding squirrels, she was greatly surprised. It was Paolo with the girl Lucia had seen him with before. Alberto said quietly, "This is Lita. We have to detain her somehow, or she'll disappear again without a trace. I'll go to the cafe to get help before she noticed me. Lucia, please follow them carefully, but don't come too close, just watch, that's it." However, Lucia disobeyed, deciding that it would be better to make Paolo and his girlfriend turn their backs to the alley where help should come from. The girl approached her ex from the side and called out, "Hi, it's good to see you. What are you doing here?" Paolo was not happy, and his girlfriend pouted her lips in displeasure. But it didn't confuse Lucia. She began to ask the guy questions about his parents, about himself, and pretended to listen to his answers, carefully trying not to look at the alley, where she already noticed Alberto, Roberto, and Benita's son-in-law rushing towards them. In a few minutes, Lita had already been caught. Paolo was so confused that he didn't even try to defend his girlfriend. He was angry and asked Lucia what was going on, as if he realized that she didn't really want to talk to him but was simply distracting him. The girl, who introduced herself to Alberto as Lita and to Paolo as Marta, was taken to the police station. After the proceedings, she was detained. It turned out that she wanted to perform a similar plan with her new victim, but did not take into account the good health of his parents. However, her greed didn't let her give up her plans, because Paolo seemed to her a very suitable prey. Rosara and Tobias, who met their son on the porch of the police station, thanked Lucia. Paolo, taking the girl aside, confessed. "Listen, I had no idea you were so brave. Why don't we try being together again?" Lucia only laughed and said what she had been thinking for a long time. "Paolo, we are all grateful to you, Laura and Alberto, and me. If you had stayed with me, they would probably have died, and I would still be working for your mother's friend for a miserable salary, with the risk of being kicked out of the team at any moment. But now I have a beloved man who understands me. We're already planning a wedding. And you'll be lucky too, you deserve it at least for leaving me. Now I know that even painful changes can lead to happiness, and it is harmful and wrong to live by inertia."
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe.